Good day. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Maharishi International University Consciousness-Based Business Series, where we have deep, insightful conversations with leaders in the field of sustainability and conscious business. I am Dr. Nakita Bruno Green, an Assistant Professor of Management at Maharishi International University and the Assistant Director of the PhD program here at MIU. Our guest speaker for today is Randall Tolpinrud. Randall has been involved in the sustainable development movement since the early 1990s, and he is the author of a popular book on the principles of green building. He is the president of the Pax Natura Foundation and the boss Luvicioso. He is the principal author of the Pax Natura Declaration and Charter, and has participated and spoken at numerous environmental conferences in the US, Europe, and Central America. He, along with other Pax Natura trustees, represented Costa Rican forest conservation programs at the United Nations Framework on Climate Change, the Conference of the Parties, and at carbon market conferences throughout the world. Randall is also the president of Group West Corporation, a corporation that promotes energy and resource-efficient building design, and has earned several awards for its residential and commercial development. He also serves on the board of directors for Wronged River Conservation Studies and is a member of the Organic Consumer Association and an advocate for non-GMO agriculture and agroecology. Randall has also served as a director of the Environmental Humanities Graduate Program at the University of Utah College of Humanities. As a broker and instructor in sustainable development with the State of Utah Development Department in Commerce, he has partnered with the Utah State University to build the most energy efficient and healthy demonstration home of its time at the university's Botanical Center. Randall received a BA in philosophy and an MS in environmental studies from the University of Utah. Today's panelists are Dr. Vintam Tompkins, a Harvard University alumni and the Deputy Director of the MIU Institute of Science, Technology, and Public Policy. He is also a former vice presidential candidate for the Natural Law Party in the 1992 and 1996 US general elections. Also joining us today is Dr. Robert Stowe, a climate change policy expert and the co-director of the Harvard Project on Climate Agreements. We also have Emmanuel Sachinga, PhD student in the Sustainable Business Program here at MIU, and Prashant Karki, an MBA student in the Sustainable Business Program at MIU and president of Y Sustainability Consulting Company. So to begin today, we would like to have Dr. Randall share with us some of his outstanding achievements of his foundation.
Well, thank you very, very much to all the organizers, Viola, Ayako, and Nakita, and to all the other panelists. It's a great pleasure and honor to be part of this. So a little bit about Pax Natura. Pax Natura Foundation really came out of the rainforest of Costa Rica in the early 1990s. We actually started on the sustainability movement in the 1970s, quite some time ago. The idea of Pax Natura was peace with nature, peace with the natural world is the fundamental building block for a sustainable future. If we're destroying our very life support systems that we all rely on, it's not a very sustainable scenario moving forward here, especially with the world population. So the idea, in contrast to Pax Romana in the Roman Empire, peace among peoples, the idea was to declare a sort of peace with the natural world. And so sustainability, in my mind, really is best summarized by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi as life in accordance with natural law. If we preserve and protect the natural systems that gave us our lives and sustains us, then we're moving in a sustainable direction, which clearly we are not right now. So I'd like to focus on one particular country. We worked in several, actually, Tanzania with the Jane Goodall Institute. And by the way, Jane Goodall is chair of our foundation, and she was on the cover of Time magazine last week, a beautiful article on this extraordinary woman. But we had 5 Nobel Peace Prize winners, 2 not now. One we had to eliminate because of political reasons, and one unfortunately passed away, Betty Williams, last year. But the project that we want to focus on for just a moment here is in Costa Rica, because the Costa Rican government, the Costa Rican people are extraordinary in the achievements they have made toward what we would define as sustainability. Beautiful example of that last year in NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, when we had all those fires going on in Central and South America. An image taken by satellite showed that there was one little section of Central America that did not have any fires, and that was Costa Rica. Well, I would like to point out that in 1948, what started this whole trend towards protecting and preserving their natural wonders was a gentleman by the name of Jose Pepe Figueres, who led a revolution to depose a very brutal and not a very successful president. And so basically it was a revolution to append the government at the time. And he eventually won, and he ran for office because they implemented a new constitution. And the first thing that this man did, which is very unusual in our world as we know it today, is he abolished the military in Costa Rica and implemented a very strong and very wonderful foundation for a very dynamic democratic country. The savings of not having to pay for military defense, which is really not a very sustainable operation in my humble estimation. It's actually a waste of natural resources, and that was acknowledged by her daughter, or by his daughter, Christiana Figueres, whom we honored at the government headquarters in San Jose about a year and a half ago. And she was the woman who got the Paris Climate Agreement completed in 2015 at COP24. And she's the daughter of him, and she pointed out that the best thing they ever did for their defense is to create three things that came out of the savings of the money going into defense, was to implement universal education, healthcare, universal healthcare in the country, and environmental protection. And so at that time, a series of forestry reforms were started, culminating in the early 1990s in what's called the Pagar Servicio Ambiente, or payment for environmental services. Now, keep in mind that, as I mentioned that this came out of the Kyoto Protocol meeting from the Rio Summit that took place to deal with the environment. And I think it was 1996. And what happened at the Kyoto Summit was the recognition that the environment was a crucial factor in any sort of sustainability. And that they also realized, under the Marrakesh Accords and under land use change, and forestry, that deforestation was recognized at this time as a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. CO2, carbon dioxide, molecule going up in the atmosphere as a result of cutting trees and many other. There are two sources. There are human sources and natural sources of CO2 going up in the atmosphere. And of course, human sources are the burning of fossil fuels and others, but also deforestation was recognized. And so a program was implemented in Kyoto called the Clean Development Mechanism, or the CDM. And that mechanism was designed to accomplish something very beautiful. Because if you think about it, the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, as for the first time in human history, brought every single country virtually on the planet together to deal with a fundamental problem, namely what's going on with our climate. And so the Marrakesh Accords recognized this, and they said, look, we have to deal with deforestation. So we will provide a mechanism to transfer capital and technology from the developed world to the developing world, because we cannot deny them the right to develop. We did it. We created the problem of climate change, and we've created a lot of other environmental problems. So we're the bad guys here, at that time. And they have a right to do that. So the idea was to help them do it in a cleaner way. That's why they called it the Clean Development Mechanism. But under that provision for reforestation, only afforestation and reforestation were recognized under the mechanism to provide carbon finance for these countries to stop deforestation in their countries. But reforestation and deforestation left out a crucial, very crucial part of the equation with regard to forests. And that is, it left out standing forests. So if you cut all your trees in tropical rainforest, and there are 33 countries in the UNFCCC, tropical rainforest countries, what Kyoto basically told those countries to do is cut all your trees, then replant them, or plant new trees where no trees had been, and you can get carbon finance for that. But that left countries with substantial standing forests, which, by the way, tropical forests and other standing forests contain 50% of all the biodiversity of this planet. All life, 50% of all life forms of the planet are contained in forests, mainly tropical forests that has 5 times the amount of carbon in those than do temperate forests in the Pacific Northwest or others. And so basically they said, cut those trees and replant, and you can get carbon finance for it. Well, the chief negotiator, who's our forester actually in Costa Rica, is Franz Tottenbach. Franz Tottenbach argued vociferously that that didn't make any sense to exclude standing forests. And we think that the main issues in Kyoto were that it presented too much of a challenge on how do you quantify that and how do you deal with all the standing forests at the time that were still there. For whatever the reasons, and they were mainly political, some economic, but also political, they were left out of the equation. And so the Costa Ricans went back to Costa Rica in the early 1990s, and they put together the world's first REDD program. REDD is an acronym for, basically REDD, reduced emissions from deforestation and degradation. And that program that was started in the early 1990s was to address also the fact that Costa Rica had lost about 80% of its forest cover up until 1980. In 1980, forest cover in the country was about 20%. Starting a series of forestry reforms culminating in the REDD project, the REDD program in the early 1990s has resulted in Costa Rica now having 54% of its landmass with forest cover. So they have recovered about 34% of their landmass to forest cover by protecting what was left of their standing forest. It's called positive leakage in the lingo in the UNFCCC. But this program, extraordinary program, it's called the Pagar Servicio Ambiente, recognizes the value, the economic value of a tree standing in 4 categories. Watershed protection, crucial for municipalities and the water that we drink. Scenic beauty turns out had far greater implications than even the Costa Ricans anticipated, because scenic beauty results in people wanting to come to your country and see the beautiful biodiversity and the birds and everything. And so Costa Rica managed to shift its economy from a very unsustainable and destructive, non-sustainable, destructive economic model, United Fruit Company and others, that were decimating their natural resources by cutting all their trees. And by protecting their trees, they converted their economy to ecotourism. And they actually started the whole concept of ecotourism in Costa Rica. Now, this is what we would call a sustainable, or I would call, a sustainable business management decision. You protect your natural world. You work to protect and preserve the crucial part of our planet Earth that sustains us. And look what potentially you get back. Now, Costa Rica is the Mecca for tourists worldwide, and it's because of what they did. So that's the scenic beauty portion. So we've got watershed protection, scenic beauty, biodiversity conservation. The world's first bioprospecting agreement was developed in Costa Rica between our partner, the National Biodiversity Institute, called the Instituto Nacional de Biodiversidad, and the pharmaceutical company Merck. It was the first time where the citizens of Costa Rica achieved or received a few pennies, but at least something back, from a large pharmaceutical that developed drugs from the biodiversity of the rainforest in Central America, especially in Costa Rica. And the last part of that equation of valuing a tree standing, besides watershed, scenic beauty, biodiversity conservation, is carbon sequestration. So carbon sequestration is basically a rainforest, a standing rainforest. Most forests are really what we would call carbon neutral. So what dies naturally and decomposes and then turns into molecules that go up into the atmosphere of CO2, they come back when you plant when new growth happens in the spring. So what they put out each year and what comes back each year is basically the same. It's carbon neutral until people start deforesting a country, and then all that CO2 ends up in the atmosphere for a very long period of time. So this was the world's first RED program. And I would like to say, and I think it was through Christiana's help at the COP24 in Paris, that RED was finally implemented and brought into the equation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and which means that now standing forests would have an opportunity to attract capital. And what the Costa Rican program did is basically went to 7,000 landowners in the country and said, look, if you don't cut your trees, we will pay you to not do that. And how did they do that? In a small, little Central American country, they put a tax on the burning of fossil fuels. They put a carbon tax in the country. They took that money and they put it into a separate account. And then at the end of the year, if your little finca and the average size is 27 hectares, it's not big projects, they're small little projects. And if you haven't cut your trees, you get paid at the end of the year. Now, the other thing is, I don't know how much time I've got left here, but I want to really just mention one other thing. Our point is that avoided deforestation in tropical forests is the most cost-effective solution to climate change. And the reason is, renewable energy development is $40 to $80 per metric ton CO2 equivalent. Carbon capture and storage somewhere between 80 and 120, even more than that, per metric ton CO2. Then you've got efficiencies, fuel switching, and all of those things that all involve doing something that involves burning carbon to do it. But avoided deforestation right now under RED worldwide is somewhere between $1 and $5 metric ton CO2. Now that's ridiculously low. It's not anywhere near where it needs to be, but that's why we start with something that we can do. Stop cutting and destroying the forests of the world. Very important. So I'm supposed to wrap it up. I apologize for going over. I was expecting a longer time and I didn't have a chance. Maybe some more of this stuff can come out later in the discussion. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Randall. Thank you, Randall. I really appreciated that amazing talk and you sharing some of the amazing work you've done for the planet and particularly for Costa Rica. And I come in from a Caribbean country with a tropical rainforest, Dominica, which was seriously impacted by a Category 5 hurricane a few years ago. I'm so very much interested in how you restore rainforests in a tropical climate. However, we're also speaking to the MIU community or faculty here, students, donors, and others who are really interested in consciousness-based education. And so I was wondering if you could also comment on why it is important to raise sustainable awareness through the education system.
Take my.
Could you unmute? Thank you.
In Costa Rica, the National Biodiversity Institute implemented a program called bioliteracy in the country. So in addition to reading, writing, and arithmetic for a compulsory education of all the children in the country, they have one of the highest literacy rates in the world, by the way. But this bioliteracy, it's important that they teach students their connection to the natural world. A big concern that we have right now in the United States, the developed world, is language. People are losing the ability to communicate because kids sit in front of their phones and their computers and they don't get out into the natural world. Well, in Costa Rica, they implemented this bioliteracy program to make them aware of their connection to the natural world and how important it is. So they teach language based on animals that you know, and the habits of animals, and they look at the plants and what the plants are good for in terms of medicines, pharmaceuticals, and all those things. So you will see environmental education facilities and programs going on all over the country. And so they realized that you've got to have the youth. You've got to have the youth. You've got to educate the youth as to the importance of their connection to the natural world. Absolutely essential. And look what's happened, paid off, a complete transition of their economy because they have the support of the majority of the people in the country. Now, I will point out that the pandemic has created some problems with the PSA program because nobody wanted to travel to Costa Rica and the Costa Ricans wouldn't let anybody into the country for about a year. And so it really has had a huge impact on their economy. But I would also like to point out that as we get now this World Health Organization panel really looking into what causes this problem, they're going to find more and more and more it's an environmental problem. It's an environmental problem of pandemics, more so than we might think. And it's a crucial thing that they delineate all the things that really happened here with regard to this pandemic so we can avoid that going forward from there. Okay, I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I see Rob Stowe shaking his head. So I'm gonna ask him if he'd like to be our first panelist to comment or ask a question.
Thanks very much, Nikita, and also to other colleagues who organized this seminar, which is terrific. And Randall, thanks for your remarks. So Randall, in my mind, I distinguish between payment for ecological services, including maintaining the carbon stock in existing forests, and then somehow unitizing the avoided emissions and selling them into a market, you know, in the form of offsets, either the CDM or whatever this turns out to be in the Paris Agreement. Do you think that second step is worth it? Does it add any value in terms of additional maintenance of existing forests?
Well, it really comes down to the debate as to, you know, is it appropriate for us to continue spewing carbon up into the atmosphere through our coal-fired power plants in China and the US now, and then to give them credit for contributing to protecting that CO2 molecule to stay into tropical forest nations in terms of their forests. And I think that it absolutely is. I've had some questions that have come up about the carbon finance and about carbon credits and the criticism of carbon credits. Of course, a lot of it has to do with corruption. A lot of it has to do in which the way it's implemented in various countries, especially sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. There's been a huge problem with that. And so I really always come back to the Costa Rican model that's a very transparent and very fluid. We've taken students from various universities throughout the United States and taken them step by step through the program in Costa Rica, meeting with every organization that we work with to show them how that dollar that comes down from the United States actually flows directly right through with a 20% administrative fee from Fondo Nacional Financiamiento Forestal, goes right straight through to the finca owner, the guy who actually owns the property. So what are and then the indigenous folks tell us, well, it's unfair because they're trying to take our land, they're trying to take, get all the carbon finance, and nothing really changes as a result of that. We just go from one bad use to the next. But I always come back to tell them, there has been no program that has ever worked to stop the destruction of tropical forests, especially tropical forests. There have been really wonderful efforts made by some great organizations, but building a wall around these countries, or building a wall around critical habitat areas, hotspots of biodiversity throughout the world, is not the solution either, because you cannot prevent countries. You can't go into a country, a sovereign nation, buy up their really beautiful lands for your own uses without compensating these people. And so the only way we're going to stop the destruction of what's left of our tropical forests in many parts of the world is we have to pay for it. We have to pay them to do it. And what mechanism do we have right now, other than the carbon credit program, the payment for environmental services program? You tell me, and I'll be happy to look at it. I'm just not aware of any other program out there that's worked to stop the destruction of these very crucial habitat areas. I don't know, did I get to your question, Robert? I hope I did.
You did, thanks. Obviously this could be a long discussion, but I will, if there's any time left, I'll yield it.
Okay, thank you.
Nikita,
Thank you. I'd like to invite, oh, Mike is next. Okay, very nice. Please go ahead.
I just had two questions for Randall. I'm curious, you said that the rainforest coverage in Costa Rica went from, over a period of about, what, 30 years, 30 years, from 20% to 54%. How did that happen? In other words, if you're protecting the forest, how does the forest suddenly spread from a fifth of the country to over half the country? That's my first question.
Well, basically, that forest cover from 1980 to about 2014, 2015. So it's not exactly such a short period of time, but there is a mechanism. When you do a project development document, PDD, you have to delineate all the areas of concerns of the program under red. And one of the concerns is that the Costa Ricans have argued for vociferously is that in their experience in Costa Rica, it's called positive leakage. So basically you take and you're protecting a particular finca or a particular farm with trees on it. And there's a natural regeneration in those forests of properties that are contiguous. And in Costa Rica, it turns out that the soils are much more conducive to that regenerative growth. And so actually our forester down there, Hermano Bando Vargas and Franz Tottenbach, have documented that positive leakage, and it has resulted in a really extraordinary thing. So if you get 7,000 landowners and you've got this checkerboard box all over the country, but adjacent landowners kind of just, it just kind of just spreads. And so it's really been a very conducive area to allow for that positive leakage and regeneration of the forest. And so it took like 50 years, 40 years for the forest to really make substantial recovery. But we have really good satellite images of Costa Rica now for the last 30 years, and it's amazing what they've been able to accomplish. Actually, I have a diagram of that right here. If I could show you that quick, Mike, it might be helpful. I think you've probably seen it. Mike, you've been down there, so I know you know about from firsthand level what's been going on. Well, I don't want to spend time looking for that, but I have a beautiful chart that has the history of Costa Rican forest cover ever since that 1980 period that I had mentioned to you, but now I can't find it. So, oh, here it is. Okay, so it shows, these are not satellite images, but it's a summary of the satellite images, and it's showing forest cover. Actually, this one goes back to 1940. So this is forest cover in 1940. And this is forest cover in 1977 and then 1987. Well, I'm not doing a very good job of putting this up here. But then, so this was forest cover in 1940. You can see the dark is all forest cover. And then, and now, as a result of the efforts, forest cover in 1997. And then 2000, 47% in 2000. And then now very recently, within the last few years, it's up to 53%.
So that's the recovery.
Not a good way to show this on the video, but
it's clear enough. So Randall, my second question, which I'll move on to, is as far as carbon capture, you were saying that that a healthy forest is essentially neutral, that with the rotting of timber and leaves and so on, it's putting carbon into the atmosphere, but then with the new growth in the spring and so on, it's recovering it. So how would it be that if we protect Amazonia, if we protect the Siberian taiga, huge forests that are standing, does that help at all with carbon capture? In other words, reducing the level that's being put into the atmosphere or that exists already in the atmosphere of carbon?
Well, like when you say carbon capture, carbon sequestration is a crucial part of planting forests. So the trend right now worldwide is plant trees. Plant trees is a very crucial component in terms of sequestering and pulling that carbon out of the atmosphere. And it's really a crucial thing to implement this in every country. Planting trillions, not just billions, but trillions of trees is very crucial. But I don't think that we should get away from the idea that the first thing we need to do is stop putting more CO2 into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels. We have to cease that immediately, and the dire warnings are coming out right now. Why do we need dire warnings? All you got to do is look out your backyard and see what's happening in the environment around you. But carbon capture and storage is a different thing. It's directly pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere through various mechanisms by putting very good capture on the coal-fired power plant, the pipes going up into the atmosphere, capture the CO2, and then pump it underground. The cost of doing that sort of thing is very expensive, from my understanding. It's extremely expensive. Should it be done? Yes, it should be done. It has to be done. But the first thing we must do is stop burning the forest, which is contributing to the problem. So let's start with the most cost-effective means first, and then move to these more expensive measures. Actually, I just read an article, I think it was in The Economist just recently, about a machine that just started up in Iceland. That's really, when the fan started blowing, it was pulling carbon, CO2 out of the atmosphere, and then they were pumping it into underground cisterns. And I cannot speak about the details of that. I just read it. It was a fascinating idea. And that's a sort of technical fix. And I'm always leery of technical fixes to the climate problem, because I think ultimately it has to come down to change of pattern, a change of our energy mix. It has to come down to stopping a very destructive industry, energy industry of fossil fuels that has to cease first and foremost.
Well, let me just clarify, Randall. So is a tree actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere more than it's putting into the atmosphere? I mean, that's my point. That was my question.
Well, basically, I'm not a biologist that way, but basically, yeah, a tree is sequestering carbon. Photosynthesis, a natural process of taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, and it gives off oxygen. It's a really crucial part of our life support systems on this planet. And so, and the only big problem that comes in, I mean, you can look at forests as sort of the lungs of the planet. And they are giving us air to breathe, and they provide so many other benefits. One reason why I was so attracted to the Costa Rican program, because they were the first to really quantify it in those 4 areas. There are environmental services, kind of a weird way of putting it, but the environmental services that trees do provide, and it's crucial for urban areas. They provide cooling, through evaporation and all the other benefits that they have. But trees pull out CO2, they give off oxygen, and the only problem comes in is when people cut them. And then all that CO2 is sequestered, and it takes about 200 years to perfect the carbon stock in a rainforest, a tropical rainforest. 200 years of perfecting that carbon stock in rainforest. And then when we burn it up, cut it down, it all goes up into the atmosphere all at once. That's where the problem comes from. So, recognize that nature is our supreme sovereign. Nature organizes everything. We learned this certainly at MIU and many other places as well. If we take care of our natural world takes care of us.
Later, I'll make some comments about, how to gain the political will to do all this, but let's see if others have questions.
Yes, thank you so much for your question, Mike. And one of our MBA students, Prashant, has recently started a sustainability consulting company, and I'm interested to find out what he might have to ask Dr. Randall on this so very relevant topic now. Prashant, can you go ahead?
Yes. I have a few questions for you. Trees will definitely help us slow climate change, but I don't think it'll help us reverse the climate crisis that we're facing today in today's time. Besides large corporations like IKEA are bringing stolen logs from Romania. So I can only imagine how others are sourcing the woods from all the furnitures that we consume here in the US and around the world. Costa Rica is a very small region, and I understand that people are doing a lot in terms of sustainability there, but have you guys done anything to take this project to other countries where trees are chopped in a rate that is having a greater impact? My second question, how important do you think it is to fight corruption in the area of deforestation and have a greater impact in countries or regions like Amazon forest, where it's most needed because they tend to alter the global water cycle and degrade to a point where it transforms into a dry savanna? And sorry, my business partner, Chad, also has a question. So what area of Central or South America is next in line to show substantial success on the level of Costa Rica's, where it's up and coming from a social, environmental, and a spiritual level? Thank you.
Well, that's a lot. That's a mouthful, but I can start with saying that corruption is a huge, big problem. And so I would like to ask students to really be aware that what we need to do is replace our political leadership worldwide, especially in Brazil, and to keep our leadership moving in a better direction here in the US. I was quite disappointed in President Biden's selection of Manchin to run the climate change issue and the energy. It didn't make sense at all. So we've got to elect people that understand this and get this. We don't have an option anymore. We have to preserve and protect what's left of not only our forests, we have to plant new forests, and we have to protect other parts of our natural world also. And that's really crucial. Is it a problem of spreading this message? Well, I can only tell you this, that in 2015, when Christiana got that agreement done with 198 or 197 nations, this is the first time in human history that the entire world has come together to address a single issue. Now, the IPCC and the reports, the IPCC assessment reports that have been coming out for the last 20 years or so, have always had to deal with the lowest common denominator, the most conservative of the 3,000 scientists that make up that panel. And it's always been too low. Their predictions have always been too low. So right now we are experiencing one of the worst case scenarios of reports that were done, years ago. And so we have to find the right political leadership and move in that direction as quickly as you can. But at least we have the Paris Agreement to start with. And under the Paris Agreement, RED is now recognized as a legitimate program for helping to protect what's left of forests in these countries. Has it worked beautifully? No, but how long did it take for this US stock market to start working more properly when it first got going? I mean, it's people repel about the idea of the marketizing the idea of natural resources. And I agree with that. But I look at the Costa Rican model. I know the Costa Rican model pretty well. And I can tell you that the issues of corruption have been very well and very clearly dealt with. It's a very transparent organization. And like I say, I've taken students through the entire program, met with every organization we work with in the country. And they've given us access to that fund that builds up every year from the tax on the carbon tax. And then it goes directly to the finca owner. And we've done a film on that called Peace with Nature in Costa Rica. And we interview people that have been through the program. And yes, they do get their payments, and it's been working very well. And we don't really need to base this on my word. You can just look at the satellite imagery in the terrible way in which I was trying to show that. But you can just look at what's happened to the country over the last several decades, and it's really worked quite well. It's one small area that has had a success story, but it's not the only part of it. There are some other parts to the Costa Rican model. It's a second nation in the world to become carbon neutral, no offshore oil drilling, it's a referendum, a national referendum, no shark finning, no gold mining, a decarbonization plan for the entire economy. And that's what we need to be declaring in every country. We need to decarbonize our energy mix and decarbonize our economy. We have no choice. The people that argue, well, we got to watch out for our jobs, some of these Republicans, I don't understand them. What good is a job if we have a planet that is literally dying in front of it? And I'm sorry to be negative about this, but it's the reality. And we have to speak to the reality of this. We don't have time to consider the possibilities. We have to act and act as a planet really quickly on this. I don't think we have any.
Thank you, Randall, for that comment. Time is running out, and we do have to act for the planet and for humanity as well. And Also, Prashant, thank you for your questions. It goes to show how passionate our students at MIU are, asking all of those questions all at once. We are so enthusiastic about solving the biggest challenges that we're facing right now with the planet. And I just want to invite our PhD student, Emmanuel, to go ahead and ask his question. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita, and thank you, Mr. Randall. It's been really inspiring to hear you talk, and I have a couple of questions. I guess on the one hand, I'm curious, what are some of the kind of lessons learned from the Costa Rican model that could be applied to other countries? And how do you see, like, what do you think we can do better in other countries, or what have we learned in the process in Costa Rica that can be applied to other countries who are trying to do similar things? Yeah, I'll let you answer this, and then maybe we'll have time for a second question.
The price on carbon has to go up. It has to go up fairly dramatically. The situation in Costa Rica, they get something like $80 per hectare per year to not cut their trees. That's not a sustainable income for these finca owners. It's a diversified. Now, what's happening worldwide is we are moving towards national baselines. So nationally determined contributions. And that's what's happening in Costa Rica also. They're looking at not just project by project, but a national level. But we have to get price moving up to make it more feasible and attractive for other nations and owners of these tropical forests or forests worldwide, to make it economically viable for them to, hey, look, if a forest company comes in and they want to give me, $5,000 a hectare to cut my trees, and I'm getting, a few hundred, what am I going to do? I'm going to sell the trees to somebody else, and I'm going to give it to them. And so the price of carbon has to go up, and we have to continue to do a much better job of transparency, and we have to do a much better job of integrating this on national levels worldwide. There are a lot of problems with this whole program, but it's not easy to put something in place like this as quickly as we need to have done. It's a complex issue. It's extremely complex. But here is one little example of what they did on their own with no help. We are the ones that went down there, and we didn't do this in Costa Rica. We're not the good guys with the white hats. We are representing a country that created the problem. So we went down and said, look, you're doing the right thing. Let's take your show on the road. And we represented them at carbon markets throughout the world. We've been speaking on the subject for quite some time. So we drew attention to a voluntary red. And I think that's helped a little bit, but it's the Costa Rican genius and their commitment to do something for their own country that was crucial. These people are so smart. We have learned so much from this little country. And we work in Mexico, and I have to say that the Union of Concerned Scientists in Mexico has been a total joy to work with, and these people are brilliant, and they're really trying to struggle against market forces that are pushing them in areas they don't want to go, like genetic GEM or GMO, genetically modified organisms in their food supply and their corn, and we're working to keep that from happening. And we won a Supreme Court decision 2 days ago that will require the country to look at the precautionary principle. Well, the precautionary principle is really crucial. In the absence of complete scientific validation, we take precautions on what we're doing. And we have to begin moving that forward on a much bigger scale, because what we're doing, we cannot solve the climate problem. Somebody mentioned this, and you're absolutely right. We cannot get rid of the CO2 in the atmosphere soon enough to prevent massive changes on this planet. But what we can do is focus on stopping the problem from getting worse. And that is really, really imperative that we do that. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I hope I did. Tell me if I did.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. We also have a question from one of our attendees. Dr. Anil here, member of faculty at MIU, is asking, what does nature want? He's asking Randall, what does nature want? From your experience working in this field, what do you think nature wants?
What does nature
Interesting
want?
question.
What
does nature want?
Like nature, Nature? What does nature want?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I haven't a clue what nature wants. Nature is what it is. But I think what's most important is, if nature could speak, it's respect me. Have respect for what I'm doing for you. Don't think that you can genetically reconfigure me in a generation with impunity. Mother Nature is infinitely complex. And the most complex information system in the universe is the DNA of living organisms. And that's evolved over millions, billions of years. And so nature, natural law, is our sovereign. And we have to honor our sovereign, our mother, our father, whom we share our life with. It is our life. And we have to recognize the things we take for granted. Water, we take for granted water. We take for granted clean air. And right now I'm living in a city with one of the worst air qualities in the world because of all the problems associated with it. But nature is intelligence. And it's, as you learn there at MIU, it's infinitely intelligent. And so we should honor that. We are not capable of reconfiguring this biosphere intellectually with impunity. We should recognize the value of, we can do some things. We can do some things. We can do a lot, but most of it needs to be in respect and honor of our natural systems, natural world. That's why we said peace with nature. That's precisely the reason we came up with that name, Pax Natura Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as you mentioned, your foundation, Peace with Nature, I'm just thinking back on my own experience as a researcher, and I am so interested in your work because you work at the systems level, and we need systems level change to make this happen and to really ensure that we have a sustainable planet for the future generation. So my question now is, how do you see us moving persons at the micro level into the direction where we have systems level change?
I want to give you the example in Mexico, because we've been working with the Union of Concerned Scientists on specifically with the campesinos, and they've been cultivating traditional maize corn for thousands of years in Mexico, and it's an amazing industry that they have going. And now they are facing this industrial might coming from Monsanto and Bayer, and the new trade agreement between the US and Mexico. And it is very, very interesting to watch how this plays out, because they are forcing these campesinos to abandon thousands of years of cultivating incredibly beautiful corn crops and replace it with this monoculture agriculture that is destroying the planet. Agriculture cannot continue the way it's going. You know that in Iowa better than I know it. But agriculture has to be a critical component in dealing with climate change. And there are lots of good things happening in and around Iowa with regard to that. But the Mexicans have fought off Monsanto and won twice. And I would like to say that a book that was written by Steve Drucker in Iowa called Altered Genes, Twisted Truth has helped. We published that book. Our foundation published that book in Barcelona, and our first press conference is what I was at the Parliament building in the UK in London with Jane Goodall and Steve Drucker. We set that up. We published the book in Spanish in Mexico, published it, printed it in Spain, and distributed it throughout Latin America. And that book became the basis of a lawsuit that the Union of Concerned Scientists sued the government of Mexico. And we won. We won that lawsuit 2 or 3 years ago. And then 3 days ago, I just got notice that the Mexican government said we're holding to the precautionary principle with regard to that. In other words, no GMO crops to be grown in Mexico right now because it's corrupting this ancient system, this old system of doing that. This is the Mexican genius, and a little bit of money, a little bit of encouragement goes a long way. They're doing it, not us. Don't give us any credit for that. But we recognize the supreme sovereignty of natural law, and here's a good example of it. Traditional maize, corn, and the corn varieties that they have cultivated for thousands of years. We think that's a crucial technology moving forward. Agroecology, we set up an agroecology program in Guatemala, at the San Martin schools, and we've been now spreading that to other schools around the country with the help of Kim Strobel and Charity Seeds, also located in Iowa. And but Pax Natura Foundation was very much involved in that too. And so, and also in Colombia, we did an agroecology farm with the padre there that does the programs for the homeless children. And so this is the kind of thing that has to be done on a massive scale, not just small little projects, but a massive scale in order to deal with the problems that we have. I hope I don't go off too far.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, your passion is also inspiring our audience today, so we appreciate that deeply. And we have a comment or question from the audience, which says that Costa Rica wants clean energy beyond clean electricity. Solar roofs, batteries, electric vehicles can help clean transportation, wind energy, including pumped hydro and hydrogen production. These can help, and other aspects of clean energy. Has Costa Rica planned for or started in these areas?
Yes, the country actually, when we completed our film, this was just pre-pandemic. We had just completed our film, and we had just completed our interview with Cristiane Figueres, and she said, you must stay one more day because tomorrow at the Parque Nacional de Sabana Sur, that used to be a military barracks, now is a national park. The government is announcing the decarbonization plan of the country. And Christiana said, look, we got a lot of problems here in Costa Rica. And by the way, don't try to drive in downtown San Jose anytime between, I don't know, anytime. Just because the city was never designed for the car. So they have huge transportation problems going to be involved. And that's going to be very difficult. And the UN conference taking place, COP26 in the UK, starting in November, is going to be addressing transportation worldwide, especially air travel. We have to get a grip on that too. Not exactly sure how we're going to do that. It's not going to be solar panels, but we have to figure out a way that we can use fuels that are less damaging to the environment. But the Costa Rican decarbonization plan is what every nation needs to put together right now, including the United States, including every nation in the world must put together a decarbonization plan for their country. And it's not like we have a choice here. I want to emphasize, this is not an option. This is a necessity that we all do that. So it's going to be a big project for them. And I don't, it's a small country, there's not a lot of money in that country, but they always seem to be ahead of the pack in the country to have the first national biodiversity inventory program, where they inventory the entire biodiversity of the country, and it's in temperature controlled vaults in Santo Domingo de Heredia, And it was done by the National Biodiversity Institute. And we were the major funders of that institute for about 15 years. And we love that idea because that biodiversity now is helped to create bioprospecting agreements worldwide. Now, that kind of commitment is Costa Rican genius and political will. And they have the support of the youth of the nation. And I think that's really commendable, very commendable.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. I'm seeing another comment here from Dr. Dennis Heaton. He is saying, thank you, Dr. Stowe, for mentioning coherent collective consciousness. Maharishi's book on management called for engaging the managing intelligence of natural law. Maharishi explained how TM and other aspects of Vedic knowledge align us with natural law. MIU has played an important role in sustainability. Thank you so much for that comment, Dr. Heaton. And this has been such an inspiring talk by Randall and Mike, Robert Stowe, Emmanuel, Prashant. All of you have made this discussion so enriching. And our students here at MIU are very passionate about the environment and very passionate about ensuring that they're aligned with roles that really help to support nature and to ensure our planet and humanity flourishes. And you are really the expert in this field. And I think you'll be getting lots of emails from our students because we always want to partner with persons who are experts and persons who can help us guide us to really be beacons of hope for the future. So we appreciate everyone today for joining us. If anybody else has any closing comments, we invite you to comment in the chat before we close our session for today. If Dr. Mike or Stowe has any comments to share as well, we invite you to share, or if Randall has any closing comments.
I just have one comment, and that is that we're not the experts. The people we deal with in these countries are the experts, and they are brilliant. And they don't have the resources that we have in the United States, but they have the political will, and they are really smart people. And I want to just thank them for setting that bar so high for all of us. It's not like, the US is the big brother and we push our will around. We're really good at military and arming the world. But some of these countries are really good at showing us the way out of this black hole that we're in. And I really want to give them all the credit. We just are tooting their horn and saying thank you to them. So that's my only comment.
I'd make
Thank
one
you so much, and we join you. Please go ahead.
I would make one final comment, and that is, obviously what's needed today is the political will to get this done. And one of the great contributions of MIU is to introduce students to what they are, who they are, what the self really is. And not only that, but to experience the environment as themselves. And when that happens, then the essential amorality of science, which has plunged us into this problem that we have, be it climate change or nuclear weapons proliferation or whatever, suddenly that amorality is gone, because then the golden rule becomes a very active part of your life. You do unto others because the others are you. You do unto your environment because the environment is you on a very fundamental level, not an intellectual level, but an experiential level. And that's a contribution that MIU makes, which is really unique in the field of higher education. Many of your panelists have gone through some of the finest institutions, educational institutions in the world, and none of us learned that there. It's completely absent, the knowledge of the self and how everything is the self, that what Emerson called the oversoul, it belongs to all of us. And so by inculcating that and delivering that on an experiential level to its students, MIU is making a huge contribution, because then if people realize that en masse, we always get the government we deserve. And if we realize that en masse, then our political leadership will reflect that, and we will generate the political will to effect these kind of changes that Randall has been talking about and bring us back from this precipice, which is an existential problem that we have in the world today. So MIU educational system is to be commended for introducing that crucial element in higher education.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's an extraordinary closing comment from you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your time and your interest in this session. Have a wonderful, blissful day.
And you do the same. And thank you very much. Very, very much appreciate
Thank you so much, our distinguished guest speaker, Randall, and or their panelists. Thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. It was great to be here.
Bye.